Welcome back to another episode of the Six Figure Creative Podcast. I am your host, Brian Hood. I'm here with my big, bald, beautiful, kind of smirking podcast today with no mustache. Thank God. Christopher J. Graham. Good to see you, my dude.
It's good to see you too, man. How are you?
Dude, I'm so good. And here's the reason why. It's because we have done 188 episodes on this podcast. And except for the episodes that I wasn't on because of my honeymoon, these just absolute shit headphones that were $19 have been with me for every episode. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see how cheap these are.
Get them away from the screen.
Yeah. They're disgusting.
There was a hair.
And yeah, I'm so happy that they're still alive, and I've been using them every episode because I know you are such a huge headphone fiend that I feel like you've lost respect for me for these headphones.
The hilarious irony of this is I get to pitch an affiliate link here. This is pretty exciting for me.
Oh God, no. On
the flip side of the coin, I'm over here recording this podcast with a $3,000 pair of headphones. There's this company called Odyssey that makes ridiculously awesome headphones that I now use as a professional audio person. And they have a whole series called the LCD series.
That way, when I burp into the microphone, you can feel every aching sound. Yeah,
you can, but it's hilarious because they sent me a bunch of pairs of headphones as part of this. And if you want to get a nice little discount.
This is really?
Yeah, Ryan.
You're going to pitch $3,000 I'm wearing $19 headphones, and I can hear you just fine, Chris. So
I can switch it up. I'll put on these other $1,200 headphones that they make.
What?
And
you got two pair of headphones. Okay.
Yeah.
This is why you watch on YouTube, because Chris Graham looks like a big old idiot right now. You're wearing $5,000 of headphones on your head right now.
But it sounds great, and I get stereo surround sound when I put them on my forehead like this. But yeah, the LCD series. Oh my God. If
anyone in our audience spends $3,000 on headphones, I'm gonna backhand you unless you are using them for some professional thing that is actually making you way more money than that. That's the only excuse you have.
Case in point, I'm gonna take these off the other pair off.
I'm so disappointed in myself for bringing this
up. I know, you walked right into it. It was like, I was like, we're gonna talk about headphones. I was like, okay, Brian.
God.
But the nice thing about these, and there's actually some businessy content here.
Oh yeah, okay, let's go. Yeah.
Because as a mastering engineer, owning a mastering business, Kyle, my assistant, works with me on that business, or at least did up until today. He graduated and he's moving off on his own.
So he finally quit and said he did the half-baked quit scene where it's like, fuck you, you're cool, I'm out.
Yesterday was his last day, and we got on Zoom at like 10 o'clock at night, and we just chatted for 3 hours into the threshold of him no longer working for me. And it was so nice. But when he was helping me with mastering stuff, he has the same pair of headphones I have. I also have the LCD X's. And so he would hear exactly the same thing that I would hear, and at a high enough resolution that we could actually do our job remotely. It was freaking awesome. It was so cool.
Kyle is actually on episode 167, where we interviewed both of our assistants. Episode title, How to Hire an Incredible Assistant Who Will Transform Your Business. So that was, Kyle was in that episode, and James, my past and current and hopefully future assistant, was on that episode. I would like to say I'm to blame for you losing two people now, Chris, partially to blame at least. Brian Skill is one of my coaching clients for marketing. And then Kyle is in my boot camp right now for the Accountability Accelerator boot camp for Profitable Producer Course students.
Those guys are both unbelievable. And it has been so fun for me to work with people and then see them graduate.
Yeah, I love it.
It's so cool.
Let's talk about ways that we can help more of our listeners graduate in their own businesses. How about that segue?
Hey, content.
Yeah, talking about today's episode topic. Today, this is an episode that it's been percolating in my mind for a while now, because I'm having to make hard decisions because of exactly what we're going to talk about today. It's all about bottlenecks. In our business, we actually have this episode outlined, so hopefully this goes smoothly today, but there are 3 personal bottlenecks and 5 business bottlenecks that I would call single points of failure. And actually, if you go way back to episode 38, we have an episode called 10Xing your business by identifying and eliminating your single point of failure. This is another one of those episodes where we kind of go back and rehash some old stuff, but we have that was like 4 years ago, we did that episode. And there's so much more to talk about today, because I cannot tell you how frustrating it has been in one of my core businesses that I have this massive bottleneck, and Six Figure Creative specifically. We're going to talk about that today. Just one of my businesses. And there's this bottleneck that has been holding me back for the past year, probably year and a half now. And I have just not fully addressed it. And so I'm going to talk about that today. So this is going to be real in the weeds stuff for me, but there's just so many examples. And I think this will apply to everyone here. And even Chris and I talking beforehand on this episode, there's even things in his own business right now that need to be addressed that are bottlenecks. And I think that if we ignore our bottlenecks in business, it is to our own detriment, because I know that we tend to focus on what we love to do. Chris loves tweaking gear and buying new gear and putting headphones on and trying different headphones on and different camera things and
vintage lenses and LUTs.
Yeah. And I love like marketing and doing nerdy things like spreadsheets and Facebook ads. And like, I just love, I love certain things as well. And I have my own demons as far as like what I love to tweak and do for fun. But there are certain things that we ignore because they're not our natural gifts. They're not the things we naturally gravitate towards. And these are typically where our bottlenecks lie. So we're going to talk about these today. And I feel like all of us have a bottleneck somewhere. And this is what separates successful businesses from either failures or struggling businesses, is that the most successful businesses are addressing the bottleneck always. They're always addressing the bottleneck in some way, shape, or form, so that there's at least something going through it. There's a difference between a bottleneck and a complete roadblock, and we need to kind of probably talk about that as well. But let's just get into this, Chris. Let's start with the outline here. We're going to talk about personal bottlenecks first, and then we're going to talk about business bottlenecks. So first bottleneck on personal is time. I think we don't really have to elaborate on this very much. If you don't have time,
I think we could do the whole episode on just the time as a bottleneck. As a matter of fact, like,
yeah, I take that back. We should elaborate on this, because if you don't have time to address your bottlenecks, you're screwed. You have to have time to address your bottlenecks.
You could make a joke about this and be like, hey, I made up this new superhero for the Marvel universe. He's called Has Enough Time, man. And he has enough time. It doesn't matter what it is, but he has enough time to do it.
That was a very weird thing you just said.
It is a weird thing, but think about it. Who would win, Superman or Has Enough Time, man? Has Enough Time, man, every single time.
What a weird superpower. I'm not going to argue it because it's ridiculous, but I'm sure you're right. But let's bring this back to business owners.
There's all these weird superhero characters like Lady Luck, whatever her name is, from Deadpool. She's just really, really lucky. And if we link this back to our audience here, if we link this back to our struggle as creatives, not having enough time is the most important thing, because what you do with that time can get you anything. It can accomplish anything. It can make any amazing work of art. It can get you any skill that you need. It can get you a relationship with any person on the face of the planet. Time is what you don't have to invest in what you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. And time can also be squandered. You can have tons of time and squander it all as well, which is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, where you have certain interests, the things that you love, the things you naturally gravitate towards. And so you squander any time you have on these things that are ultimately not the actual bottleneck in your business. So time is first on this list because, again, like I said, if you don't have time, you are not going to be able to address whatever bottleneck you have that is holding you back from actually succeeding as a business owner or just as a person. Anything you're trying to accomplish, time is the most valuable thing. And the whole reason we make money is actually to buy back our time, or it should be to buy back our time in our businesses. And it should be the other way around. We should not be trading time to make more money. We should be making money to get back more time.
Yeah, this is something, Brian, that I am still wrestling with. I know that what you're saying is true. I've tasted it. I have more than one business, and some of them are pretty hands off. That's really, really nice. But having this vision of like what it would look like to continue to improve in that world, it's important.
Yep. Let's move on to number 2 of personal bottlenecks here, and that is your mental state. As freelancers or any business owners, especially freelancers, there is no separation. There's not really any separation from us and our business. Like we are one and the same. We are our business, and our business is us. So if our mental state is not in a good place, then our business is not in a good place. There's no way around it. So this is what I would call an absolute single point of failure, an absolute bottleneck. And Chris, do you want to elaborate on this a bit? Because I feel like this is an area you've been through a long journey on the last couple of years.
It's funny, when your mental state is not at its best, that can manifest in a lot of different ways. Sometimes the way that manifests is that you get dirty fuel to burn. And this idea of dirty fuel, I'm fascinated by it. So like, revenge is a dirty fuel. One of my favorite books ever is The Count of Monte Cristo. And there's a great movie about it, but the book is just amazing. And it is just the juiciest, most vicious but justified revenge that I've ever heard about. Like, this guy was wronged and he comes hard.
Everyone loves a good revenge story in a movie, but it is dirty fuel.
It is dirty fuel. So he's motivated by, there's arguments that he was motivated by love, but that dirty fuel can drive you to do unbelievable things. It can drive you to spend an incredible amount of time. For me, I love to play the guitar. Sitting down and playing the guitar I'm at my truest self when I'm doing that. And I can just go off in my mind for an hour or two. But that comes from a place where I used to play guitar to escape from the world. It was disassociative. It was like, oh God, like I'm trying to process what happened to me at this thing and I got PTSD and I can't tell anybody about it. So I'm going to go play guitar. And that dirty fuel drove me to be able to like make a living playing a guitar there for a spell. But at a certain point, that dirty fuel, you have to recognize, okay, well, a lot of my skills and my talents are from having dirty fuel. I'm at a point in my life where I have to shift to a clean fuel, something where I'm doing this for not necessarily non-selfish reasons. Your issue might not be that you were doing things selfishly before. It might have been that, like for me with my business, is I had a desperate need for control in my life. I didn't feel safe because I hadn't like wrestled with my demons yet. I didn't realize what was all buried in the back of my mind. And so I built systems to try to control the world around me so that the world was more predictable because I didn't like surprises. So I got really good at building systems. I did it on dirty fuel. And now at this point, I have to find a way to use those gifts, but to do it with clean fuel.
Yeah. So to kind of bring this back a little bit, because I like the analogy of dirty fuel and clean fuel, but I think it's important to talk about why dirty fuel is bad, because revenge can motivate us. It can make us do incredible things, like you said. Escapism, those can motivate us to do certain things and like to pursue certain things and develop certain skills and implement certain things. But when it's dirty fuel, it's putting the priority in the wrong place. We're doing something for the wrong reason. And the reason this is a personal bottleneck is because if you were running off dirty fuel, you are most likely working on the wrong things. And so we talked earlier how you could have all this free time and then just squander it. It's because you're running on dirty fuel. Not
only that, but dirty fuel gums up the engine. Dirty fuel deposits nasty crap and the engine starts to slow down. And I'm going to tell a hillbilly story here. So,
which I would imagine the gunk would make our creativity suffer in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly, Brian. Yeah, like when you've got that gunk from running on dirty fuel, it makes you less than what your potential would allow you to be. Now, a great example of this is when I bought my first house, a friend of mine had a riding lawnmower. And he was like, my grandpa found this in the trash and he fixed it up. If you want it, you can have it.
Is that the one you were talking about on a episode before, the blue collar mindset issues that you have? Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'd love this mower, but it's huge. It's 25 horsepower, 46-inch deck. I can't get it on a truck without taking it apart. I'll just drive it across town.
I remember that 46-inch deck conversation. Yeah.
Dude, it was awesome. So I drove it like 5 miles across Westerville to my house, and I would use the heck out of this thing, but it was like 25 years old when we finally had to put her down.
Oh, you had to put her down? When did that happen?
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. I'm so sorry for your loss, man.
I'm serious. Like, I didn't even put her down myself. Like somebody else had to put her down for me. But she'd get real gummed up. Lawnmowers, by their very nature, suck in a lot of dirt, and they're using dirty fuel and dirty oil. They get nasty. So there comes a certain point in a lawnmower's life where it won't run very well. It won't start. And you need to use a product. We're not sponsored by them, but a product called Seafoam. Seafoam, you spray in the air intake of the engine, and it sucks this fluid down in there, and it turns it into like flashes into steam, and it scrubs the crap out of the inside of the engine. And all of the leftover gunk from running dirty fuel gets flushed out, and like this huge, nasty ozone-killing cloud shoots out of your engine.
Wonderful for the environment.
Wonderful for the environment. And then your engine runs great. Runs really, really, really well.
We're going to do a 6-figure creative salute to Chris's old lawnmower. If you want to learn more about that story, go to episode 96, How You're Sabotaging Your Business with These 5 Toxic Mindsets. We did that back in September 2019, Chris. You talked about your lawnmower in that episode.
Her shifter was a silver skull with red eyes.
Really?
Yeah, she was awesome.
It sounds way cooler than you made it out to be on that episode.
Anyways, she was dope. Like I basically had to mow the side of a cliff with that thing, and it was awesome.
Yeah, you talked about it already.
But anyways, so let's bring it back to the seafoam analogy of dirty fuel and clean fuel. So when your mental state is not at its best, that will often give you creative superpowers for a little while. And this is so often like the superhero story. Let's talk about Iron Man, right? Iron Man builds this thing and then eventually it starts to kill him and he has to get a transplant so that he's running a different arc generator that's cleaner, right? That's the same illustration that I think a lot of us need to have this epiphany that like, I have not been running on clean fuel. My motivation has been trying to impress other people rather than serve other people. And I need to reset everything from the ground up and build this business from a healthy place. Now, I think where this starts to get problematic, Brian, is I've got a little tough love for you. We were having a conversation a couple weeks ago and you were being a little prickly.
I am. That's my default state, Chris. What occasion were you speaking of specifically?
I don't even remember. There's so many times when you're just being a prickly dick like that. I'm just like, oh, okay, it's Brian and I love him anyways. But you said something. I called you on it and you said, well, that's just one of my flaws.
Yeah.
And that I think is a really interesting conversation for this topic. When you look at your mental state and the behaviors that you do that harm the relationships with the people around you, or that make your business not run as well, or that just get you riled up and make you stupid, it's not efficient and it's not smart and it's not a good long-term solution. And to just say, oh, it's just one of my flaws was probably the stupidest mistake that I have made over the course of my entire life. I would be like, well, yeah, sometimes I get nervous and I start plucking at my eyebrows.
That's why you don't have eyebrows. Shit, I was wondering what happened.
I have super thick, beautiful eyebrows, but I used to get weird and I'd start to pluck at them, or I would wake up shaking in the middle of the night, or I would be in public and I'd like all of a sudden would get really, really uncomfortable and I'd shake my hand.
Let me slow you down. I feel like we need to bring this back to the bottleneck conversation.
And this is where I'm bringing it back to just accept I'm a creative and I've got some eccentricities and it's just part of who I am. That is a mental state bottleneck. Instead of asking, well, why? Why do I not want to watch this TV show about a woman having a romantic relationship with a priest? Like maybe I should dig into like my complete aversion to this particular thing that I'm avoiding. So I think coming back to when you've got your mental state and you're trying to evaluate if it's a bottleneck for you, you have to accept that your flaws are not necessarily who you are. Your flaws are in a response to something that has happened to you. And to bring in this back, another superhero character that we could have, I've talked about him on the podcast before, is Priorities Man. Priorities Man just does the right thing in the right order. That's his superhero ability. And he can beat Superman quite easily. He just needs to do the right things in the right order.
Step 1, order kryptonite from eBay or Amazon.
Yeah, step 1, acquire kryptonite. Step 2, acquire lead line box in order to hide kryptonite from Superman's X-ray vision. Step 3, get Superman. This is actually what Lex Luthor did in one of the movies from the 80s. And so if you want to build a successful creative career, you have to prioritize properly. You have to build, they talk about this in the book, The One Thing, exponential dominoes. If you take, I use this in coaching sessions all the time, but if you take a 2 millimeter high domino and you step it up next to a 4 millimeter high domino and then a 8 millimeter high domino and so on and so forth, by domino like 36, it's the size of the Empire State Building. And if you knock down that first tiny domino, it will not eventually knock down the Empire State sized building domino. Priorities are everything in business. I'll say that again. Priorities are everything in business. And if your mental state is a bottleneck, you won't prioritize properly.
Yep, that is a fantastic point. We've been talking about this for a long time, but I think this is so many people's bottleneck. Honestly, this is probably the root cause of every bottleneck in this list that we're going to go over, both personal and business. Let's talk about this just for a little bit longer, because I think this is worth talking about. A lot of people in our world, I'm just going to use one example. We talk about niching down a lot. And so many people don't want to niche down because they love doing all these things and they want to explore all these ideas and they don't want to settle down in one small idea or one simple area because of that fear of missing out on these other little things. I think that is a mental flaw. I think that's an issue we have as creatives because we feel like if we're going to be pigeonholed into something, it's a false belief that we're going to not enjoy what we do. And I think the truth is, if we were to explore inward and see why do we feel the way that we do, it's going to be because we are running on dirty fuel in some way, shape, or form. We are, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we are not in the self-actualization, which is the top of the pyramid. We're somewhere in the ego, which is the second to top. And it's because we are trying to go for validation instead of self-actualization, and that's running on dirty fuel. And I think that so many problems are caused by this. And I don't know the solution. I'm still going to be prickly to you, Chris, because you pull at my strings in a way that so many people don't do. And it's just the way that you are because of your flaws, and it pulls at my flaws. And then we're a feedback loop at some times. And people have seen a relationship over the last 3 years. It's been up and down. Like, it's just the way it is. Like right now, that doesn't mean that we can't improve and shouldn't improve and try to build our relationship better. Like we had a little kerfuffle at the beginning of this because of systems issues. And like we got through that and we're fine, but like some of these bottlenecks we're going to talk about, especially in business bottlenecks later on, some of these things are like, fix it, move the fuck on. So some of them that way. Mental is not. Mental is it is an endless game. It is something you will be working on for the rest of your life because you will never be at 100% with your mental state. There's no way to achieve that. If you do, please let me know because I would love to meet you and have you on the podcast.
Please let him know via telekinesis because you will have unlocked new and exciting parts of the brain. You'll be that's the true ability of Priorities Man is he figured out how to do telekinesis.
So I think it's worth moving on because we've been on this one for so long and I want to get to the others, but this is, the mental state is the root of all bottlenecks.
This is, and as we move on, let's just sort of leave this in a box that we can come back to.
We will have to revisit this.
It's funny because as podcasters, we're supposed to be like, hey, we're smart and we're saying cool stuff into fancy microphones and we're clever. You hit the nail on the head, and that this journey goes and goes and goes, and you continue to do it because your self-actualization is to find your capacity. It's to find out what you are capable of doing and what unique value you can bring to this world. And to close this up with one thought, I'm going to get the math wrong here, but I think in the human brain, there's about 1 billion neurons. And those billion neurons are all connected with little wires to each other. And there are 1 trillion wires in there.
86 billion neurons, you nerd, just so you know.
So in the human brain, there are 86 billion neurons.
Oh no, we're not going to edit this out. We're going to keep the correction in there.
Okay. So my 85 billion of my neurons were not functioning properly just now. Only 1 billion of them were online. But there's something like 1 trillion of these little neural connectors, the pieces of tissue. My point is it's complicated. How this thing works is more complicated than how anything else in the known universe works. And so it's going to take some time, man.
Yep, 100 trillion connectors, just so you know.
100 trillion?
Yeah.
86 billion to 100 trillion.
That's a lot of permutations of things going on there.
Wow. Yeah. So at this point, the mental state that you are currently in, podcast listener, no living thing will ever be in, including you, for the rest of existence.
Yeah. Let's move on because we're in the weird, like mind-blowing big number elements. So let's bring this back down. I promise you the rest of this episode will not be this heady, but this is an important one because everything else is, again, you are your business. It's one and the same. So the cleaner your fuel, the better off you're going to be. And this probably, to be completely honest, should have just been its own episode because there's probably more to say with this, but we got the outline here. So we're going to continue down the outline here. That's how we do it.
We know our priorities are wrong, but that's not going to stop us from proceeding.
Yeah, we are completionists at heart. All right, so let's move to number 3 in personal bottlenecks. Then we'll get to the business bottlenecks. But number 3, personal bottleneck, let's just recap real quick. Number 1 was time. Time is a huge bottleneck. If you don't have time to fix these bottlenecks or work on these bottlenecks, you will not fix the bottlenecks. You'll be stuck forever. Number 2 on personal bottlenecks was mental state. And now number 3 for personal bottlenecks is skill. And it's easy to see why this is an issue because if you lack the skill to fix the bottleneck or do the thing, especially in business, then that will be a big problem. Like just for example, if you suck at what you're trying to sell, if you're not good at the service you're trying to provide, you will forever have a massive bottleneck on pricing, on just anything in your business. You might not fail, but you will struggle greatly. Chris is trying to come up with a nicer way of saying that, I can tell.
It's an interesting point because every creative that I've ever met in my life has been exceptional in some ways, but often they are exceptional in ways that they don't either leverage for their business or that are the wrong things to be exceptional at in their business. Perfect example, audio mastering engineer Chris Graham, who knows more about building systems and automation than 99.99% of the rest of the population. Why?
I've said it a million times, but if you put all that skill and talent in that you know from automation and systems building, if you put that into literally any other healthy business model on earth, because mastering is a tough business. It is not the best business model. I'll say it straight up. It is not the best. Even in audio, it's one of the worst business models. Only the best mastering engineers do it well. If you put that amount of effort, energy, and time into any other business model, you'd be a multimillionaire.
Yep. I didn't prioritize.
Well, it's not all about money either. Just to be clear.
True. But if I had the maturity to understand that, like, hey, you are crazy good at this one thing that's actually way more valuable than the thing that you get your ego from being good at.
And this actually goes back to the mental state conversation. Bottleneck number 2. Really, it wasn't a skills issue because you were good at mastering. You're like, the skill of mastering was fine. The skill of automation, you were actually incredible at, and systems building, if a tad overcomplicated at the time, but we grow into it. But there's just anything we're going to talk about, especially on business bottlenecks, it involves learning a skill. And as creatives, when we gravitate towards the things that we are interested in, and we shy away from those things that we're not interested in, we are not developing those skills that we need to develop the most. And we are doubling down on the skills that we need to develop the least. That was why you got so good at systems building and automation, is because you were doing it out of avoidance, because you're running on dirty fuel. So you got really good at the systems building and automation. And you completely neglected the fact that you had 30,000 people on your email list for your mastering business. The fact that you could have doubled your prices overnight, which you eventually did, and not have to change anything in your business and doubled your income, or at least brought it up by 50% or whatever. You ignored so many great things because your priorities were fucked, because you were running on the dirtiest fuel possible.
Let's be clear. We made a super popular business podcast while I was in the middle of that. Like there was a lot wrong that I was not aware of.
And I'm poking fun at you because it's just the examples are there and it's easy and it's top of mind. But I struggle with these same things. There are skills I should be developing that I'm not. There are mental issues that I should be dealing with that I'm not, or haven't, or I am, but I haven't fixed. There are issues with my time that we're going to talk about in this episode, what I'm doing to fix the time things that I have in my own personal bottleneck. So I'm struggling from these things myself. I am just as guilty as you, Chris. It's just for some reason yours are dirtier laundry for some reason.
It might have something to do with the gratuitous trauma of my youth.
Sure.
But let me bring this home. When it comes to your skills, you either don't have the right skills because you have a mental state bottleneck, or you don't have the time to get the right skills because you have a time bottleneck.
You know what? I feel like this is going to be a 2-part episode because we haven't even got to the business bottlenecks yet. And I'm looking at the outline for the business bottlenecks, and they are true bottlenecks. But I'm looking at these personal bottlenecks, and to me, these are so interconnected that I wouldn't call them bottlenecks. I just think that this is just called being a healthy business owner. It is because if you can't prioritize because your mental state is flawed and you're running on dirty fuel, then you're going to be working on the wrong things. You're going to be squandering the time that you do have. You're going to not be developing the skills that you need to develop. And so these are all kind of meshed together into one big lump called yourself.
You see how we just slowly came around to recognizing that we should prioritize our topics in this episode differently. So we're going to change our outline right now. And now we're going to just focus on the personal bottlenecks. Next episode, we'll talk about business bottlenecks. I think a great place for us to camp out here for a little bit, Brian, is how do you tell when you have mental state bottlenecks?
Yeah. Okay. So this is easy in some ways and really hard in other ways. So mental state bottlenecks, there's symptoms for it. One of the symptoms is you're always working on the wrong thing. So that's the priorities issue. Some of them are, it can be interpersonal. So people find you prickly.
You're guilty. I'm guilty too. For sure.
It could be the thing where you should be doing something, but you can't make yourself do it for whatever reason. Some of it's accountability in there. So like that's a different kind of topic for a different day. But sometimes it is like, we know we should eat healthier. We know we should go to the gym. We know we should do this and that. We know we should, like, I'm just using fitness examples because those are easy to conceptualize. I know we should be doing these things, but I'm not, because something deep inside of me would rather have these other things, would rather have that extra dessert, would rather have that bag of chips because I'm hungry, would rather have sit my ass on the sofa and not go on that extra walk or go to the gym, or sleep in and not wake up early to go to the gym. Like there's certain things that like we cannot prioritize the things that we should be doing in our life. So it's that lack of motivation, I think, is another good symptom of flawed mental state.
It's interesting because motivation, really there's two pieces at play there. There's motivation and friction. And often, for me, like I don't really do it that much on air, but I cuss like a sailor in real life.
We cuss on the podcast too. We bleep it out now just to be family
I cuss
friendly.
a lot more in real life.
Really? Which is funny because I cuss about the same.
Even like around my kids sometimes.
That's because you're father of the year. Yeah.
Not at them, but like, so it's challenging for me because it comes back to neural pathways, what we talked about before, is that when you have done a behavior again and again and again, what happens in the human brain is that electrical signals are being passed between neurons over these neural pathways.
100 trillion neural pathways. Yeah. I learned that today.
And as these pathways get used, the brain recognizes that it should insulate the pathways that are being used the most so that the electrical energy from neuron to neuron is the most efficient that it can possibly be.
It's basically like out in the woods, you'll see animal trails because they're going a certain way every time the trail is worn down. So it's easier and easier. Or think about it like your brain paving the pathway because this is the route most used.
The example that's very often used in this conversation about what we're talking about is called neuroplasticity. It's the ability to change the pathways in your brain. So the illustration that's often used for neuroplasticity is you're in a mountain with a sled and you have gone down the mountain on your sled again and again and again and again. And eventually you have one path, a rut, and that sled it's ice at this point. It slides down that one pathway. Now, at a certain point, when you have something in your life that demands change, like what I went through and having to get in therapy and all that crap, is that you get to the top of the mountain and you say, I'm going to try something new. And instead of putting your sled in the same old spot, you turn over to some nice, fresh, powdered snow, and you try to take a new path down that mountain. And it stinks at first. You don't go fast. You get stuck along the way. But you make it to the bottom of the mountain. It takes you 10 times longer than it would your normal path. You get to the bottom of the mountain, you go back up, and you go down that path again and again and again. That's practice. And that path starts to get worn in, and within your brain, those neurotransmitters start to get more insulated, and it gets easier and easier and easier with repetition to do that thing that was initially uncomfortable. That's neuroplasticity. And often when we're in a situation like this where we recognize there's a personal bottleneck here. Why do I struggle with this? Why do I keep doing this? I know this isn't in my best interest. Making that decision to do something different and do it again and again and again and get good at it is an essential human trait to be able to reprogram yourself, to make some activities that are really difficult for you now really easy for you later.
Yeah. This sounds a lot like Atomic Habits, where you start to have these cues and then you start to do this routine and then you do it over and over again to where it's second nature. So like, it's like habit building, I guess. That's part of neuroplasticity. I don't know the terms very well, or this whole, I don't know I don't even know if this is legit science. So take this for a grain of salt, people listening right now, but it makes sense. And I'm looking on Google right now just to make sure we're not blowing absolute smoke up your asses here. But from what I'm seeing, this is real stuff.
This is real stuff. This is like Nobel Prize winning scientists that I'm quoting what I've learned, reading books over the years. So the neuroplasticity thing, it's really easy. So for example, Brian, like you get prickly when you're frustrated.
And you have this wonderful skill at making me frustrated sometimes.
This is true. But I've gotten better at like when sometimes you're like, it's like, okay, Brian's frustrated. He needs to vent that by verbally
abusing you.
A little bit. And then I've got to find a way to navigate around that. But you do that because that's how you're used to, you've done it so many times. So that you're in the sled?
That's my my Jamaican bobsledding route that got me the gold medal. Yeah.
Exactly, the Jamaican, yeah.
So I think before we wrap this episode up, Chris, we should talk about maybe a fourth little bonus personal bottleneck here that you just happened to add to the list, and I argued with you off air, and then we decided this is probably worth adding. And this is a bottleneck of blind spots where we have mental state, we have time, we have skills, but the issue that can hold us back even further is these blind spots where we don't know which one of these things are an issue, or we don't know which priorities we should go after, or which skills we should develop, or which areas we can either minimize or systemize or eliminate to get more of our time back. We don't know these things. So blind spots are a massive area. I think most people struggle with this. I know you have blind spots,
big
Chris.
time.
Lord willing, I know you do, and God knows I have blind spots. So this is another one where I don't think there's an end state. It's another one of those infinite games where we will always have blind spots, and they are inherently, we don't know about them, or else they wouldn't be blind spots.
It's a little different than priorities. Priorities is, okay, you have all the information. Now put that information in the right order. Act on those things in the right order. Blind spots is not having all the information that you should have and thinking that you do.
Well, that's the worst. Yes. You know, those people that are like, they know just enough to be dangerous, and they're so adamantly correct about whatever they're talking about.
I am those people. Like everybody I know is
only master engineers are those people. They're the ones who have the least amount of information, and they're the most adamant that they're correct. Yes.
Well, and that's the funny thing is that often when you watch a superhero movie, the villain isn't actually a villain. They just have a massive blind spot. Like, let's take, who's the big purple guy from Marvel? I'm making everyone really mad right now. Thanos. Thanos is not evil. Thanos has a blind spot. And that blind spot is that he thinks that the ends justify the means. It's like everyone's going to prosper if I kill half of the universe. I might like the outcome, but the way you're getting there is the worst thing ever, even though there's like this dispassionate, like at random, that's so messed up. You go back to the original Iron Man thing, and Iron Man's like older buddy. He was motivated by the greater good, but his blind spots made him do evil in the service of the greater good.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. I like these analogies, but our audience isn't going to go kill off half the world. Or at least I hope you don't. I hope our audience isn't like that. The point remains the same, which is when we have blind spots, we either do stupid things, or we do the wrong thing, or we do nothing.
Yeah.
Those are three dangerous things.
And I tell you, if I had to look back at myself when we started this podcast, before then,
which is fun. It's literally like a time capsule. You can go back and listen to episode 1 through 50 and hear old Chris Graham at any point that you want. You won't, because you haven't listened to episodes 1 through 50 ever in your life, but you could.
It's a time capsule. The thing I struggled with the most was blind spots. You know, that's the reason like my marriage failed, is I had a blind spot. I thought reality was one way. It was not. I was not completely grounded in what was actually happening around me. I had other software running in the background that was freaking my shit out all the time, giving me nightmares every night. But the blind spots I think are the saddest of the personal bottlenecks.
I would agree with that. Well, sort of, because sometimes the mental state, there are flaws that you know about. It's not a blind spot, and you refuse to address. I think that's the saddest. But other than that, I think blind spots are the second saddest.
If you know your problem and you don't fix it, that is, thank God, I feel like, and I hope this isn't a blind spot, that's not an area I've struggled with.
I don't know, Chris. It's a blind spot for sure. Yeah.
If I have a blind spot and I don't know about it, like, oh, I see what you're doing.
Yeah. You just got the joke, guys.
When I have a blind spot, like I look back at my life now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would do so many things differently, especially in regards to how I treated other people. I think where you start to get in a weird spot is you start to say, well, the ends justify the means. Like, partner can deal with my grumpiness. They should, because of how hard I'm working. Or,
yeah, that's a dangerous mindset.
Man. Like, you start to get on all these slippery slopes, and like humans are creatures of blind spots. For me, those blind spots are part of how we operate. And I look at like, okay, well, I had this thing happen to me when I was a kid. I erased it. It's called dissociative amnesia. It was something my brain did to survive. It created a blind spot for me so that I could move on. And thank God. And that maybe this is too intense for this topic right now. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to feel out how this ties into the blind spot in a way that is relevant to our audience, because I'm not sure that it does.
I think suffice it to say, when there is a blind spot, it sabotages everything because blind spots often beget blind spots.
Yeah, it's like a cancer. It's like if you know you have cancer, things can be, especially early on, things can be done to treat it and to potentially eliminate it. If you don't know you have cancer, if it is a blind spot for you, you can find it later on and it's even more difficult to deal with, or it can just kill you outright and you never knew you had it.
Blind spots spread like cancer. And yeah, I look back at my story and I wish to add one more superhero here. I wish I'd been able to be Blind Spot Man. It's like Blind Spot Man has no blind spots. He is aware of reality. That's his superhero power. He's aware of reality.
I don't know. There's some things I am blissfully ignorant of. Like, I don't want to know what between your pinky toe and your second toe smells like. And that's a blind spot I'm okay with having, Chris.
Easily solved, Brian. Easily solved.
Yeah. Blind Spot Man knows that, and he has to live with that knowledge for the rest of his life.
That Blind Spot Man is incredibly powerful, but he's also probably very sad. So our blind spots.
Blind Spot Man is an anti-hero.
And that's the weird thing. I think a good place to end this topic on.
Yeah, because it's end of day and we're getting off into weird subtopics now. Yeah.
Us normies that are not Blind Spot Man have blind spots, not necessarily because they're flaws, but they're a product of nurture. They're a product of our effort to survive on planet Earth, and our evolution and previous versions of humans benefited from having certain types of blind spots. And now those are no longer beneficiary and we have to work through them. We are a strange breed, Brian, because for a long, long time, we were hunter-gatherers, and we are not hunter-gatherers anymore, but we are most well adapted to being hunter-gatherers. So our blind spots in modern society are ample. And that is the long-term, I think, journey of a modern human, is to start to really question, what are my blind spots? What are the assumptions that I have?
Well, I don't think you can find those. I think this is the one area that you absolutely cannot do on your own. You have to have someone else, mentors, coaches. You have to have friends, a therapist. Preferably, the pricklier the friend, the better when it comes to blind spots, because they're not going to hold shit back from you. Like, Chris, if you came to me and asked me point blank about things that you wanted to know blind spots, I would tell you 100% without holding back. And I would try to deliver it nicely. I'm not freaking demon. I would try. It would depend on the blind spot.
That's, I think, the thing. That's an essential ingredient in a healthy relationship, is that the person that you're in the relationship with is able to tell you where your blind spots are, but that you also have the ability to hear them and accept it. There's two pieces of that.
Kind of how you called me prickly earlier, and I said, man, I feel personally attacked by this bald man looking at me right now, but damn it, he's right.
It's difficult. And I think that's one of the things that makes my friendship so fun for me, is that we have a good feedback loop, and like we're both prickly enough to tell the truth without being cognizant of the consequences emotionally to each other when we do that.
And we have to all have friends like that, though, to help, because those friends are the ones that will call out blind spots and not hold back because the fear of making you feel bad. And there are some things I don't bring up because it's not going to benefit either of us to bring up. That's just being a good friend. But there are certain things where, like, blind spots that are detrimental to someone, you have to bring those up as a friend. You have to bring those up for people, even if they'll hate you for it.
You just tiptoed around a really interesting Pandora's box of stored up complaints and feedback.
And we're going to leave it at that. So come back for next week's episode. We'll tackle business bottlenecks. There's 5 of them. We didn't even get to in this episode. But you know what? Sometimes these episodes evolve into their own thing. And I kind of like it. I like these 2-part episodes where we get to kind of dive deeper into like an initial outline we had. Just because I didn't think we'd talk for so long about around these personal bottlenecks or these personal single points of failure or whatever you want to call these personal ones. But this has been a good episode because I feel like I have to now go self-reflect. When this episode comes out, I'm going to listen to it on my walk and just think through objectively as a listener, what kind of shit I have to deal with as a husband, a business person, an influential source of information. Like, and I don't say that as egotistical, but like we have thousands of people listen to us. So I have to make sure that I'm in a healthy spot if my mental state is not good and I'm not coming from a healthy place, then I'm passing on my dirty fuel to other people. So I also have to take that into account.
We're sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, we're sorry for our flaws.
And I think to end this, one of the things that I love the most about being a small business owner is that my small business gives me feedback about what I am getting better at and what I'm getting worse at. And there's an impetus there to work on myself so that I can prioritize better, that I have less blind spots, that I have more free time, that I'm just generally a healthy person, because I know if I'm healthier, my business will do better. You're not going to do better by being less healthy. And I think that's where these personal bottlenecks start to get so interesting, is a lot of people experience a lot of personal growth because their business revealed flaws in them. And that's absolutely, like, I don't know that I would have ever got into therapy if it wasn't for my businesses. Like, I started to see patterns in my life of like, why do I do this? Why do I keep doing that? Why can't I stop doing this? So when it comes to these personal bottlenecks, there's a big opportunity for not just the cancer of blind spots to spread through your life, through your business, but when you start to get healthy, healthy begets healthy. When you start to get healthier for your business, you often start to get healthier for other relationships and other parts of your life. And that's cool. That makes this podcast not just about, here's how to make more money by doing what you love. Like, here's how to take what you love and not just make money with it, but lead a better life. Be able to get that feedback from your business about what are your blind spots? What are your flaws? What are your priority issues? And to start to pour that back into growth.
So tune in next week's episode where we're going to talk about how to make more money, because we need money. Woo-hoo! Let's make some money, Chris. Money,
Always
money.
Be selling. A, B,
It's all about the money, y'all.
C.
It's all about the money.
Yeah.
ABC.
Profit.
We just lost all of our listeners.